About 10 years ago, I was driving trucks for a living, not long haul or anything. I never did overnight jobs. It was just a box truck with no sleeper cab. The job was mostly long, lonely hours on the road, but I didn't mind. It was a rainy, overcast day, and I was driving along a remote highway through farmland. The sound of the rain on the truck's roof was almost hypnotic, and the road ahead was a blur of asphalt and gray skies. I was starting to feel tired, even though it was only late afternoon, so I was thinking about stopping for a coffee at the next service station. My rig for the day was an older truck that belonged to my company. It was in good shape, but it had some quirks. The gears were sticky, for lack of a better word. It took some getting used to, and only a few guys at my work could drive this particular truck. I was one of them, and my boss was one of the others. I kept driving, knowing that the nearest stop was over an hour away. To the left, on the highway, there was a car in a shallow ditch. It didn't look badly damaged, but it was definitely stuck. I slowed down, thinking somebody might need help. It wasn't uncommon for city drivers to misjudge the slick rural roads, especially in bad weather. I pulled my truck over to the shoulder and climbed out. The rain had eased up a little. It was barely even a mess. I stepped off the road into the ditch where the car was. I peered through the windows but didn't see anyone inside. The car was empty, its engine off, and there was little to no damage. There was a large dent in the side, but it seemed to have come from something else. I walked around the vehicle, checking for any signs of the driver. That's when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around to see a man approaching. He was wet, his clothes sticking to him, and he looked a bit disheveled. The man explained that it was his car and then told me he had lost control and ended up in the ditch. He'd been trying to flag down help for the last hour. He seemed harmless enough, just a guy who'd had a bit of bad luck. I can give you a lift to the next town or the next service station, I offered. My cell phone doesn't have service out here, but we can call for a tow from there. He seemed relieved and thanked me. We walked back to my truck, the rain still misting a little. I climbed into the driver's seat, and he got into the passenger side. I know it's not smart to pick up strangers, but it's something that I had done for a long time at that point, mostly because of the loneliness from being on the road. Maybe it's also because I feel a duty to help. Because of that, I didn't hesitate to give the guy a ride. As soon as we set off, the man started making me uncomfortable. I felt like he was looking at me, but whenever I turned to him, he turned away. We weren't talking at all. I tried to start a conversation, but he answered all my questions with a single word or, at most, two. It was awkward, and I wished I hadn't offered him a ride. About 20 minutes into our drive, the man suddenly pulled a knife and pointed it at me. I swerved the truck out of shock, but managed to keep it on the road. "Pull over and get out," he ordered, his voice cold and steady. I had heard about highway robberies, but I'd never thought I would be a victim. Like I said, I had picked up people before and never had any problems. The man was holding the knife out, but keeping it a fair distance from me. I didn't get out right away, I guess because I was still in shock. He moved in closer, though, and that was when I unbuckled my seatbelt and opened the door. As soon as I was out, he slid into the driver's seat, slamming the door behind me. I stood in the rain watching helplessly as he tried to drive away, but he struggled with the gears. My truck was a bit tricky to drive, and he couldn't seem to figure it out. After a few attempts, he gave up. I could hear muffled cursing from the cab. After no more than 5 minutes, he got out of the truck and sprinted into the nearby field, disappearing into the rain in the rows of canola. I stood there for a few minutes, and then, when I was sure he was gone, I climbed back into the truck, locking the doors behind me. To my relief, the keys were still in the ignition. I was worried that he would have taken them or thrown them away, but he wasn't that smart. I continued down the highway until I finally got a cell signal and called the police. They told me they would search the area and look into the abandoned car in the ditch. I never went back to the spot where the car was, but I did wait for the police at the nearest rest stop. When I talked to them, I found out that the car in the ditch was stolen, and my description of the man matched the suspect. I headed out after that and finished my day of work. The police called me a few days later and told me the man was caught wandering aimlessly through one of the canola fields next to the highway. Since the evidence was pretty clear, they didn't need anything else from me. I never found out exactly what happened to the man, but I think he did time in prison for stealing the 2 vehicles. After this happened, I didn't pick up any strangers for a while, at least a year, but eventually, I went back to old habits. I tried to be a better judge of character, though, and never had a problem since.